So, namaskar and a very warm welcome to our 75th week celebrations of the Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav. As today is our 70 today as India completes 75 years of its independence, our conservation to coexistence campaign also has completed 75 weeks successfully. This campaign has traveled across the 10 biogeographic zones and 75 zoos and is now in its final week. And at the Central Zoo Authority, we are taking this campaign forward through a massive celebration for our week. And we are starting off this 75th week celebration with our first talk on the snow leopard, which will be Know Your Species only, as the Know Your Species, Know Your Zoo talk will be scheduled once again on Wednesday this week. So joined in today to speak to us on the snow leopard is Dr. Yashveer Bhatnagar, who is a senior scientist at the Nature Conservation Foundation, Mysore. Dr. Yashveer is fascinated by the high mountains of Central Asia and, of course, the Himalayas, and has devoted his career to understanding its mammalian species, their interactions with humans, and the mitigation of threats. Over the past 2 decades, he has worked with several collaborators to find effective ways to conserve this unique ecosystem. His newly established Himalaya Lab at the NCF is an initiative to ensure that the protection of these mountain ecosystems is prevalent. He has worked in several research and training institutes in India and abroad before joining as a faculty in the Nature Conservation Foundation, and will speak to us today more on the snow leopards, also known as the phantom of the mountains. So over to you, sir, to begin your presentation.
Thank you. Many thanks to you, to CZA, for having me here for this important occasion, especially it being our 75th Independence Day. So I think it is an honor for me. I'll start off with sharing. Hopefully it should go off smoothly. Can you confirm if you see my
Yes, sir. Please go ahead.
slide? Okay. Okay, so I'll try to speak about the passion of my life, the mountains, and of course the species there, but focusing essentially on the snow leopard as has been mentioned just now. So I normally start this whole thing with a quiz. Many of the talks, whether it is in schools, colleges, or even in government fora or other places where I'm talking about snow leopard or these species. And there is a reason why I kind of show these 6, 7 pictures of animals. Unfortunately, this is not interactive, so I can't really have a kind of a quiz, but let me just answer that, when I go to any of these fora, everybody is able to identify that this is an African elephant and this is an Asiatic elephant. That this is a zebra and a leopard, a tiger, and hippopotamus. In fact, almost everyone is able to even identify the duck-billed platypus. But the moment I come to this, there is silence, and people really are not able to identify that this is a Asiatic ibex, a wild goat species, and this is the Ladakh Urial, endemic of Ladakh, and a wild sheep species. And with this, I just want to emphasize this point that the Greater Himalaya, the Himalaya, actually have amazing number of wildlife. In fact, if you see, the Himalaya alone have more than 15 ungulate species, the hoofed animals, which is like almost the same or if not higher than the rest of the mainland India. So the diversity of wildlife in these areas is very high. In fact, a lot of these, the wild sheep, goat, equids, and bovids, I mean the cattle, yak, they're all relatives of our livestock. So they are a very important genetic resource too. The area also has amazing number of carnivore diversity, large carnivore diversity. And the apex across this entire range is, of course, the snow leopard, which is the species on which we are talking about today. So here I'll give a very brief overview of snow leopard, what we know about this species, the conservation, and perhaps the way ahead as far as India is concerned. Now, if you look at the global range, we have snow leopards spread across 12 countries in more than 2 million square kilometers. And the entire area that you see, the dark blue, are areas where they actually occur. Similarly, in the Himalaya, they occur in about 1.2 lakh square kilometer, almost continuously from Jammu and Kashmir to Arunachal Pradesh. So they are widespread. They occur in some fairly inhospitable areas, essentially above the tree line. Tree line being the areas where the forest ends and the high altitudes begin. So, more than 3,500 to the limit of vegetation, which is about 5,500 meters or so. This is the range in which the species occurs. Um, and as a result of that, perhaps, this species, compared to many of the large carnivores, was almost unstudied till the 90s. Most areas are very difficult to access, not just in India, but the rest of its range also. They are remote in all the places. They have immense amount of hardship to reach these remote corners with complete logistic support. So essentially, researchers to work in these areas require a certain amount of resolve. This is something which had started in the 70s and 80s, but really caught on only by 90s. But still, the information about snow leopard was not coming. Not much was getting known in spite of major efforts being made by researchers, essentially because of these very limitations. In such areas, let alone seeing snow leopards, even finding signs of snow leopards is extremely challenging. And so researchers would spend days and days and days, years, and not really be able to see snow leopards. So it was not getting it had then acquired this whole ghost-like uh, uh, enigma about the species, not only far away, but even close by. If you look at this, I don't know how many of you can see the snow leopard here. There is an ibex to the left of the frame, and there is a snow leopard too. They are amazingly camouflaged. And I'm sure researchers and other travelers who would travel these mountains would probably come very close to snow leopards, but miss out on the species. So this is something which really didn't allow enough to be known about the species. So it remained the gray ghost, the ghost of the mountains. Well, my journey in these areas began in 1991 as a young researcher. I went to the Pin Valley National Park to study ibex. And being a dog person, I really hoped and wished to see not the snow leopard initially, but the Tibetan wolf, something that I was really keen to see. I mean, I had to wait about 10 years to have my first Tibetan wolf sighting. But the first snow leopard sighting that I had was life changing for me. It basically changed the way I looked at this species and developed this curiosity. This was a sighting barely a meter away from me. Both of us were very surprised to see each other at that time, and it just disappeared in front of my eyes. It took seconds for it to reach the edge of this cliff and just disappeared. And I realized why people call it the ghost. But beyond this, after this, kind of a relationship developed with great curiosity to understand this species, apart from the other core areas of my interest. But things have changed. I don't know how many of you know, but in the last decade, especially, these scenes are not uncommon in places like Ladakh and Spiti. There are scores of people who are there in these mountains in the peak of winter with -30, -40 degree temperatures in snow, trying to look out for snow leopards and actually coming back with very, very memorable snow leopard sightings. This has, of course, increased a lot of opportunities for conservation in this area, but also a lot of challenges. But what has changed between the 90s and now? And I think a lot of it has to do with the amount of consistent research which many organizations in India and abroad have been doing, which has yielded information through great technology support, from offered from camera trapping and other, on ground walking the ridges and mountains of these areas to get to understand where the snow leopard actually uses, which areas they use it more. And the density is something that we have been able to calculate, and we understand that snow leopards are barely about 1 or 1.5 snow leopards to 100 square kilometer is like in a good area. But in a relatively poor area, it can be less than half or a third of such densities. They occur in large home ranges. In many places, they occur in areas more than 1,000 square kilometer over the course of the year. And they depend essentially on ibex and blue sheep across the 2 million square kilometer, but also a few other wild species. In many areas, they may actually attack the livestock of the agropastoral people also. So this is something which we understand. There are other issues about snow leopard behavior and ecology that we have understood over the course of these last 20 years in particular. But the key thing is, like I said in the beginning, that we now know the best areas seasonally where snow leopards occur, and we already knew that they use landform edges to put marks, like the top of a cliff, the bottom of the confluences of two streams. These are on ridge lines. So these are the places where snow leopards normally use for traversing. And we were able to now get an idea about within these which are the areas which are better. And with the involvement of a lot of local communities, we now are in a position to have much better predictability of snow leopard sightings. So a combination of this has actually changed. This has created some threats, but also, like I said, a lot of opportunities. Snow leopard, occurs across this range and has numerous threats. Uh, Conventional threats are there. When livestock grazing, sometimes very intense livestock grazing happens across this area. And migratory herders come with thousands of livestock, and these livestock may outcompete the native prey. Often may increase the amount of attacks by snow leopard on livestock, and thus attracting retaliatory killing. So this has been going on, and it continues to some degree. But in the last few years, the developmental pressures have actually reached the remote corners of the range in India, across India, of course, and even other range countries. Much of it is because of the development needs of the local people, but also geostrategic reasons in not just India, but many other countries which share tense borders. So most countries are trying to reach infrastructure projects right up to the border, and this benefits, of course, the local people, but the pace is so high that it is now causing tremendous threats through these developmental measures which are being taken. Now, interestingly, tourism is also a threat in places which have very sparse resources, like in Ladakh, for example, where it is a cold desert, of course, where the water table has very little water, deep, and much of the rivers and streams can barely suffice for the local people. But look at this graph of Ladakh, where the population is just about a few lakh, the local population. But the visitation 2010 onwards has multiplied exponentially to now more than 4 or 5 lakh. Much of these tourists come during the summer months of July, August, September. So what changed? what changed was this movie. And India, all of us love movies. And after this movie, this change has happened, and which has resulted in many places being occupied for tourism, tourists reaching in many remote corners. You might have seen some really sad sights of tourists using their SUVs to go along the waters of the Pangong. So similarly, they disturb the chase kyang, black-necked crane, and so on. But along with this, along with development, there is another very fundamental big issue which is now beginning in this area with the problem of free ranging dogs, uh, aided by tourism. Of course, they are attacking livestock, they are attacking wild ungulates, and even snow leopard. So they are now spread across the entire mountain range, not just near settlements where they started off because of garbage, but they are now spread deep into the mountains. Along with this, all these climate change is not helping. In most cases, climate change is reducing the habitat quality. It is allowing people to stay longer in these higher altitudes, use these higher altitudes more intensely. And these, apart from this, there are further other, damage to pastures, um, uh, permafrost melting in these pastures and destroying some of those which are now happening. Needless to say, these mountains, the Himalaya, have tremendous value. They regulate the entire weather pattern of South Asia, in fact, much of Asia, and they provide for the local people and billions, millions of people downstream. Plus, they have tremendous amount of cultural importance. But these areas have tremendous uniqueness. These are areas which, snow leopard range as such, because you have the entire mountain range that I mentioned about. The snow leopard is pervasive in these areas, many other wildlife too. But even human use is pervasive. And snow leopards occur outside protected areas. People occur inside protected areas with few alternatives that can be offered to them outside protected areas. So um, we realized, a lot of us researchers realized, that we need a different approach to conservation in these high altitudes, and all stakeholder involvement is critical. So this led to the whole thinking about how to work towards landscape level conservation of this species by strong involvement of community in resolving conflicts, in encouraging them to have alternative livelihoods in terms of tourism, as well as agropastoral good cash crops that are remunerative, sound awareness programs that allow them to understand, consult in a joint manner how best to conserve these remote areas. But also, this approach talks about how we can work with other sectors of the government and civil society which deal with human welfare to converge. So, for example, if livestock are an issue for wildlife, it's not just the forest sector which has to work, but working closely with the animal husbandry sector, we can find joint solutions for even things like conflict management, uh, having predator-proof corrals, tourism, agriculture. Like I said earlier, these can provide some good alternatives that can allow people to reduce deep dependence on these mountains, especially the destructive dependence on these mountains. And of course, convergences with the armed forces can help conservation of some of these very remote areas, and also help with better infrastructure development if we actually work on in partnership. So this led a lot of organizations to come together with the Ministry of Environment and Forests to develop the Project Snow Leopard, a participatory landscape level conservation program which began in 2009. And in fact, the first management plan has been made for a 4,000 square kilometer landscape in Spiti, where some very clear, good policies and practices for convergences, for engaging with the local community have been worked out. Governance mechanisms have been worked out, and resources from the Ministry of Environment have been allocated. And similar work is happening across all the 6 states and union territories in the snow leopard range as of today. That's progress is slow. There are a lot of challenges, but this is something which has happened uh, for the positive conservation of the species. Uh, Snow leopard population assessment of India. Now, this is something which began because we had no clue about how many snow leopards are there. There are only guesstimates which were there. In 2019, the Ministry of Environment and Forests got together with many partners and set up this protocol, which is adapted from a global protocol, and which should by this year or next year yield a sound estimate of snow leopard occurrence across the entire 1.2 lakh square kilometer range of the country. Now, finally, what has all this led to? Over the last decade or decade and a half, what has happened is that the entire government policy has shifted from trying to protect exclusionary protected areas like national parks and sanctuaries. From there, it has actually moved to inclusive landscapes. And in fact, if you see, there are about 50 protected areas in snow leopard range, covering about 7,000 or square kilometer. But using these landscape level participatory approaches, now the government, UNDP, and many other partners, they have managed to sort of secure, identify close to 60,000 square kilometer, close to half of the snow leopard range, where already these innovative management plans and frameworks are being developed for the conservation of the species. So we do have miles to go, but we have at least made a good beginning. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Yashvi, for this very comprehensive presentation on the species in focus, the conservation threats that the species faces, as well as the way forward to conserve the species within India. We now move on to question answers for today's session. So, sir, the first question that is for you is that the snow leopard is a flagship and is part of the National Conservation Breeding Program in selective Indian zoos. So, how can this program effectively inform conservation of the species?
Can you just repeat the last part, please?
How can this program, the ex situ conservation breeding program, effectively inform conservation of the species?
Yeah, so the XC2 is something which has been going on in Darjeeling for a very long time. And there are various other zoos which have actually also been trying in Kufri and some other places in Uttarakhand also. Uh, the I think what the project Snow Leopard essentially says is that we should have the ability to breed healthy snow leopards in captivity in XC2 programs. But the key is to restore the in situ populations, because still there is scope for securing these species, something which is actually happening. And like I just mentioned, the ministry's project Snow Leopard actually is slowly but steadily having some very good results for us to see. But I would say that at this stage, the X2 program is just something like, it's good to know that we have the ability to breed snow leopards in captivity. If need be, for some areas, there can be some amount of restocking that can happen. But I don't see that happening soon, especially if the states are able to and the partners are able to do the conservation, in situ conservation effectively. Yeah.
Right, sir. And so the next question for you is that somehow snow leopards are yet to secure a center stage in the conservation scenario in India. How do you think this can be addressed?
The snow leopards are?
Somehow, snow leopards are yet to secure a center spot in in when you talk about conservation of species in India. How do you think this can be addressed?
Yeah, okay. So being an optimist, I see that, see, like I was telling that, in 2000 or around 2000 or in the late 90s when I was in the Snow Leopard Trust and then in Wildlife Institute, we used to very often talk that there is almost no discussion about snow leopard. Yeah. And I would say that since 2004, when we began the consultations for Project Snow Leopard in the states and other partners, uh, from there to now, there's a huge amount of improvement in recognition of snow leopard as an important species. On a different count, I was actually sort of amused and surprised when one of the major actions of the government of India, the army, actually was codenamed Project Snow Leopard. Yeah, I think perhaps on the borders a few months ago. So I think there is sure and certain increase in snow leopard the understanding among the local population as well as the larger citizens in the country about the importance of snow leopard. I think if you persist like this, it should certainly improve further. Yeah.
Right, sir. And the last question before we conclude the session is how impactful have community initiatives been for the conservation of snow leopards in its landscape?
I think this has been at the center. It's at the center of the successes that we talk, because even for the landscape level conservation, the confidence has built only because we have seen successes with community-based conservation. Like I mentioned in the beginning, that community and snow leopards have a very intricate interface all across the snow leopard range, and unless and until the community's concerns are addressed, and unless and until they take stewardship or very or improve the attitudes to live with snow leopards the way they have probably been living for a very long time, success really can't be achieved. And in this, I won't may miss organizations if I say, but apart from the state forest departments and wildlife department, the organizations like the Nature Conservation Foundation, Snow Leopard Trust, and WWF India, Snow Leopard Conservancy India Trust, Wildlife Trust of India. And so many such organizations have actually worked, and now increasingly the Zoological Survey of India. Uh, Many of these organizations are working towards understanding the species, understanding the ecosystem, the threats, and many of these actually are working with communities, demonstrating the models that can work for fostering the coexistence agenda, and that gives confidence at scale to the government and many other partners when we work to upscale many of these lessons to the national level, to the policy level, to the strategy level in programs like the Project Snow Leopard. Yeah.
Right, sir. So those were the questions for you for now. And so with this, we come to the conclusion of our day one talk of the 75th week celebration of the Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav. On behalf of the Central Zoo Authority, I would like to thank you, sir, for taking time out of your busy schedule and joining us for this talk on the day that India completes 75 years of India's independence. And I would also like to thank the audience who have been with us throughout, and would also like to inform them that we'll be back tomorrow from 4 to 4:30 p.m. with our day two talk for the 75th week mega celebrations, which will be on the Himalayan newt and other lesser known amphibian species. So do tune in for that talk tomorrow from 4 to 4:30 p.m. And I would also like to inform you that National Zoological Park New Delhi is the zoo in focus for our 75th week celebration. So do tune in to their social media pages to know more on what are the activities that they have planned, and do participate in all the ones that are online. And thank you so much once again for joining us for this talk. Namaskar.
Namaskar. Thank you.